up, my fellow Shield Brothers? It's the Shield Brother here for the History Armada with your weekly dose of history. And today we're going to be talking about the Battle of Chotusitz, sometimes called the Battle of Chotusitz, which was fought on May 17, 1742 in Bohemia between the Austrians under Prince Charles Alexander of Lorraine and the Prussians under Frederick the Great, or Frederick II. And the specific battle was the last battle of this war, and it led to the Prussians defeating the Austrians. So with that, let's get started for today. The battle was a part of the War of the Austrian Succession, sometimes referred to as the First Silesian War. This, their second and last major battle of the First Silesian War, gave both the Austrians under Prince Charles and the Prussians under Frederick II a chance to redeem mistakes made at the Battle of Chotusitz the year before. For the Prussians' part, Frederick had spent more than a year retraining, remounting, and refitting his cavalry, which had been embarrassed him so terribly at Chotusitz. For the Austrians, under the new commander Prince Charles, their infantry saw 1742 as a much better trained and disciplined force than the raw recruits that they had been at the beginning of the war. Each side was anxious to test themselves again on each other's forces. The armies were about equal in strength at roughly 28,000 and 30,000 each, with the Prussians having 2,000 more infantry, but the Austrians having about 2,000 more cavalry. The Austrians were attempting to retake the occupied Prague, and the Prussians were trying to block them from accomplishing this act. The Battle of Chotusitz was especially notable in that it was the only major battle started by the Austrians during this war. All the other battles had been instigated by another force. So Prince Charles had entered Bohemia with the intention of liberating and occupying the capital of Prague. Faulty intelligence misinformed him of the strength of the Prussians in the area, and he was unaware that Frederick was before him with the main Prussian force. The Prussian army had divided with intent of preventing the Austrians from reaching Prague. The main army of nearly 20,000 followed a day later under Prince Leopold of Anhalt. With the two Prussian forces a day's march apart and out of supporting distance of each other, Charles had an opportunity of inflicting a defeat in detail on one or both of the Prussian forces by dividing and conquering, so to speak. Unfortunately, a wary Charles hesitated for a day, and the two Prussian forces, realizing the danger, both moved towards each other, meeting up. Leopold, marching through the night, reached Chotusitz at 2 a.m. and established continuous contact with Frederick. Leopold went into camp a little north of what was to be the field of battle on the plain in the valley of the Elbe near the small hamlet of Chotusitz. Charles of Lorraine, hoping to catch Leopold cut off from Frederick while the Prussians were divided, advanced north with his force in 4 columns. He decided to attempt a night attack, or commissar. Charles' overnight advance took longer than anticipated, and it was well after dawn that he approached the field with 30,000 troops. Alerted to the danger, Frederick gave Leopold instructions to deploy on Chotusitz and hold until the rest of the Prussians could come up with Frederick, bringing their forces up to roughly 28,000. Frederick gave orders to Leopold to deploy leaving room for Frederick's force to come in on the right, and he then began marching towards the field at 4 a.m. with the intent of arriving at 7 a.m. Leopold marched from the camp of Chotusitz and positioned his troops facing southeast in the town, and to the right and left with cavalry on each flank, and each flank resting on difficult terrain. The left flank terrain was very broken with gullies and ponds, and unsuitable for any cavalry combat. On the right, Leopold's cavalry wing, under the 70-year-old Wilhelm Dietrich von Buddenbrock, a veteran who had fought at Onarad, spread his cavalry line to the right to take advantage of a rise to the ground which concealed it to an extent, allowing Buddenbrock to outflank the oncoming Austrian left flank cavalry. Charles advanced north from the town Chotusitz, but difficult ground slowed him, and the army drifted slightly to the right, aggravating their vulnerability to an attack by Buddenbrock on their left flank. So with those maneuvers pre-battle, that's when the actual battle was instigated. By 7 a.m., the Austrians were deployed and had advanced to within cannon shot, while Frederick had arrived on the field with the rest of the Prussian army. At 8 a.m., Charles ordered a general attack. Frederick rode up the rise, behind which Buddenbrock's cavalry was partially concealed. observed the Austrian position, quickly unlimbered some of his guns, and began cannonading the Austrian cavalry, just bombarding them. Under cover of his fire, Bodenbrock's cavalry advanced at a trot and then at a gallop. The Prussian line, in a furious charge, outflanking the Austrian first line, broke and drove the Austrians back on their second line, crushing the two lines together. The day was hot and dry, and the cavalry melee raised a huge cloud of dust, in which the second line of Austrian cavalry now overthrew Bodenbrock's, sending the Prussian cavalry tumbling back broken, pursued by the Austrians and having suffered over 2,000 casualties already. The Austrian cavalry was then stopped and driven back by cavalry under Rothenburg and a couple of Prussian infantry regiments. That this flank settled down for a time to some minor clashes and feints back and forth. The broken ground on the Prussian left prevented their cavalry then from supporting the infantry in the town of Chotusitz. The Austrian infantry stormed the town and took it almost completely, except for a small section that held out. Failing to completely clear the town, the Austrians set it on fire at about 9 a.m. Austrian right flank cavalry advanced, encountered the same difficult ground, but managed some successful charges and breakthroughs. These were ultimately halted by Prussian cavalry, which, like the other flank, ran out of control galloping through the Austrians, finding themselves isolated and cut off behind Austrian lines. The Austrian cavalry and infantry on the right advanced again, but finally broke off to loot the Prussian camp and moved beyond any further use in the battle, seeing how their new training was not enough to keep them together for the battle, and they went off to loot. In the center, the Austrian infantry made a number of very determined attacks, which were all driven back with heavy losses by the disciplined platoon fire of the Prussian infantry. The burning town made it difficult for Charles to coordinate the efforts of his center and right. The Prussian infantry slowly drove the Austrians out of Chotusitz. Back on Prussian right, another cavalry fight was won by the Austrian cavalry, who then pursued the defeated Prussian cavalry, leaving the Austrian left flank exposed. Frederick had finally made his arrangements, and coordinated attack of 23 infantry battalions was made on the open Austrian left flank. The Prussian infantry advanced at the double quick preceded by 15 cannon. Under a furious fire from gun and musket, the Austrians gave way, falling back on their center and right. Seeing this and the possibility of being cut down from his line of retreat through Chotusitz and forced back against the brook of Blelinka, Charles gave the order for a general retreat at about noon, abandoning his cannon at the town center of Chotusitz. In a generally orderly withdrawal, the pursuing Prussian cavalry was effectively held off by the Austrian cavalry. So the Austrians, although broken and having to retreat, they did not rout. They managed to have a pretty organized and orderly and sustainable retreat as they fell back, meaning that the Prussians couldn't just ride down and cut them down in the retreat. So each side suffered around 25% of their armies being casualties, and subsequently avoided any further major conflicts in this war. The battle would lead directly to the Treaty of Brussels. Frederick, learning that his French allies might be attempting to make a separate peace, would soon pull out of this war himself, having gained the territory of Silesia for Prussia. Friedrich Leopold von Gessler, who led 20 squadrons of cuirassiers in the charge of Bodenbrock's cavalry, was promoted to lieutenant general and received the Order of the Black Eagle for his achievement at Chotusitz. Prince Leopold was also made a field marshal for his efforts in this battle, and this battle was very important for bringing peace and bringing an end to this War of Austrian Succession, meaning that the Prussians also got to take this nice new slice of land with them at the aftermath of this battle. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something about the War of Austrian Succession. Maybe I'll do a couple more videos on this because it's very iconic and very important event in history. And if you like this content, go ahead and leave me a like. If you did not, leave me a dislike. If you have a comment, suggestion, or concern, you can leave that for me in the comment section down below. And as always, this has been Shield Brother with the History Armada for your weekly dose of history, and I'll catch y'all next time.